This episode is brought to you by Hub24, whose purpose is to connect advisors to innovative solutions that create opportunity. They're massive supporters of advisors, in particular those going solo, and they're one of the early players in the managed account space, and their epic functionality in that area, as well as their commitment to user experience, has led them to become a market leader in terms of advisor satisfaction. I can speak from personal experience when I say their BDM team are total legends, and they're there to help you work through the best solutions for your business. So you can check out more information at hub24.com.au. This episode is also brought to you by Centuria, who are a boutique, ultra high-performing fund manager. They've won pretty much all the awards there are to win. They've got a bunch of 5-star rated funds, and they're heavy into technical support for advisors around their products and strategies. On top of that, they're just an awesome group of people, and they've got a dedicated team there to support you. And if you haven't already spoken to the guys at Centuria and heard about what they do yourself a favour and reach out.
G'day, Caitlin.
G'day.
How's it going?
Very good.
Very good, very good. Hey, so we met a couple of weeks ago about venture capital and things like that.
Yes.
But you just happen to have one of the coolest stories that I've come across in my professional life. Truly. And then looking more into it.
This is out to everybody.
Yeah, I was feeling special until that moment. Thank you.
But it is pretty cool.
Thanks.
And then especially...
it's like devil and angel, I think. This is going to be the dark side and the light
It
side.
goes both ways.
Funnily enough, only a couple of podcasts ago, it turned into Muhammad and Fraser.
Okay.
Muhammad Ali and
versus, Joe
Fraser.
Fraser.
Right.
Joe Fraser,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So it's not the first time that's happened. But with this whole thing with financial advice, it's becoming a lot more female orientated, and we're starting to see some really awesome female founders of financial planning businesses coming out, making a real splash, to the point where our last event, which I know I showed you, was a panel entirely of female founders. And they,
So good.
yeah, but they were definitely there on their own merit. It wasn't a female event. It was, how can we learn? And that is one of the things that I've noticed from financial planning is this female theme. You have recently started Capital XX. And so I thought you would definitely have some awesome insight into why we're starting to see this theme, and it's growing rapidly, I would say. And from our conversations, you were saying there's better outcomes with female founders, both with success of the outcome, also with the profit as well. So I thought you were definitely the best person to come on and lead us through why you think female founders are doing so well in business in general, and then we can obviously scope it down into financial advice later.
Yeah. Cool. So maybe I'll start with a bit of an overview of the business case to the value that female founders represent in the VC startup ecosystem.
Yep.
And then we can sort of go through maybe some of those trends that flow from startup through to what you guys are seeing.
Definitely.
So, what I've really tried to do with my experience in setting up or being part of a team that set up a venture fund that's gender neutral, it became really apparent that there was this missed opportunity for everyone and for an investor. And as a VC, at the end of the day, my real responsibility is to maximise return to investors. And what became very apparent is that female founders globally deliver far higher return on investment, revenue and company valuation. And the stats actually say 12% higher revenue, 35% higher return on investment and 64% higher company valuation pre-exit,
Is it like
and
an
46% post.
That's isn't that just crazy?
So let's remove
It's
gender.
a great business decision.
Well, yes, and it gets even better from the perspective that, from an investor's perspective, not from an overall ecosystem perspective, female founders have secured less than 7% of global VC dollars over the last 10 years. And last year it was 2%.
What? Is it going down?
It's going down.
What?
So there's actually a blue ocean opportunity. I know everyone does this face like, hang on, I don't get it. And what I'm really trying to educate the market on is let's take off this label of female versus male, us versus them.
Totally.
There is a $20 trillion cost currently to our economy from the lack of female participation in senior positions of business and leadership.
And that's sort of extrapolating the statistical benefits you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what we've got is this hockey stick where the cost is increasing dramatically because female roles in the traditional economy are becoming redundant at a far faster rate. And I'll explain that. Ooh. Women tend to, historically, work in more admin, marketing, HR types of roles.
Right.
These are the roles that are becoming most impacted by automation and AI.
Right.
So if you look at first the opportunity to translate those skills from one side into the new economy, they're not there. And we know that this is not a competence issue. I mean, I'm just giving you the stats. It's not competence, it's confidence. And we really need to get more women to see the opportunity of tech and start to translate their skills from traditional over into the new economy, which is not happening. And we've got very low participation rates at the moment of about 20% of female participation in the new economy.
So would you say it's more barrier to entry or more lack of interest?
It's not lack of interest.
No.
I think there's awareness. It's not interest per se. So I think if you don't have a network of individuals that have got exposure to starting a startup, you're probably going to be less inclined, whether you're a guy, whether you're a girl.
Yep.
If you don't have that network, then you don't have the role models, you don't have the people to follow. And it's important for women to be able to say, I've seen my friend Sally or Jane or any other name start a startup, and I therefore know what it's going to be like. I know what the challenges are. I've got someone to talk to when it does get hard. Because if you don't, you hit that first roadblock and just think, I'm doing the wrong thing and I'm out of here.
Well, that's actually like one of the key essences of XY Advisor to an extent, because there's so many small business owners. And XY Advisor is one of the ways they get that feeling of other people being on the same journey.
Of learning by osmosis, I guess.
Yeah. And so that, that very much replicates itself in the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, so that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to bring more females together, getting exposed to each other, and then just let the magic happen.
Well, I think from my side, I've tried to use my voice and experience in setting up a fund as part of a team, not directly, to just bring awareness as much to the startup ecosystem, but really to investors. And that, to date, has tended to be more men. And, we're trying to encourage more women to look at investing in VC and everyone to invest in VC as an asset class.
Yeah.
But to encourage the current body of investors to actually look outside where they're currently placing their dollars and look at it and say, hang on, like that face you made before, there's a huge opportunity. Why am I not actually engaging with this market more and more often?
So you're saying there's a bit of, I guess, helping guide and foster that familiarity with developing businesses and that sort of, like what's happened over years, like with, I guess, the male side of that area. And then it's also actually having people there to accept and actually be interested and not just shut it down prematurely.
Yeah. I think that there's two sides. There's one, an education component, which is very important to the ecosystem regardless. Australia is very much at the start of its lifespan, I suppose, in the VC and also startup space. We've proven to be amazing innovators. Now we've got to learn really how to produce results and commercialise. And then from my side, it's, okay, let's make our startup community aware of the talent and opportunity and the investors. And then the next bit is really to bring a pool of capital to life that can be made available to female founders. So that's probably the second bit, and that's the capital X component.
And then you have the ETF off the back of that. Yeah. Because with those stats, I want to be in that ETF. Right?
Well, we're working on it.
Please hold.
Actually, while we have you here, and you did allude to this before, it was giving females awareness that they have a friend that's done this. While we have you here, can you, and no one likes to talk about themselves, and I get that, but I would love for you to share a bit of your story. So if there's any female financial planners who are considering to becoming entrepreneurs and starting a business, you're a great example of this, right? And so, I even just love the story about your dad's piece of advice, and then fast forward 18 years and there you are on Necker Island. And that's so cool. And it would be awesome if you could share with us your story.
Oh, okay, cool. Happy to. Well, I suppose my story really for me starts, funnily enough, at the start of year 12 or during my school years. So I'm dyslexic, can't read or write properly still. And I tell that because I think regardless of gender or where you come from, there's kind of these connotations that starting up a startup is quite easy, and all of a sudden you become an overnight success, and then you're selling your business for $1 billion.
That's what it's like, Clay.
Yeah. Yeah. And while we'd all like that to be the case, that's not necessarily true. So I sort of tell a bit about dyslexia because it really, at that time, not being able to read or write properly really takes you out of the game. I mean, if you can't communicate, how are you going to do anything?
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that's important for business owners and entrepreneurs regardless is just sheer persistence. The ability to sit when it's really uncomfortable and just keep on going.
So would you still sit, I guess, if someone's doing a presentation, how's that experience like?
Yeah, so for me, and that's the most common question. Like, how can you be in this industry and like what's going on there? So for me, it's not numbers that play with me. It's the written word.
Okay.
So it's even more important for me when I get a pitch deck that it's like 10 to 12 slides, problem solution really clearly articulated.
With loud sound.
Well, with
Maybe
with really just simple communication about all those key aspects that any investor is going to want to see. So I suppose I'm a good guinea pig because if I get it, anybody else is going to get it.
That's what Clay says about me.
Oh, really? And you learn workarounds. Everyone's got a weakness, right? And I think that the reason why I try and tell my story of my greatest weakness is it's actually ended up being my greatest success or key to success, because it's what actually really makes me, I think, valuable in this ecosystem. Because my brain, when you present me with a problem, in any dyslexic's brain, every area fires up when you're presented with a problem. Whereas a non-dyslexic's brain, when you do ECGs, follows a very strategic path. It goes from point A to point B to point C, and it's quite methodical.
I wouldn't mind. Where's this test? I wouldn't mind.
Well, there's heaps of stuff online, and there's, for anyone that's listening, there's lots of, just type in what is it like to be dyslexic, and there'll be examples that come up. Anyway, this is not me in a therapy show.
That's just really interesting.
So let's get back to journey. But when I told my dad that I couldn't read or write at the start of year 12 after going through, pretty much all my school education, he said to me 3 key things. If you want to do this, you're going to have to work harder than anybody else. But if Richard Branson can do it, so can you. And, that sort of became a mantra for me. And I never thought that I'd get the opportunity to meet Richard.
Yeah.
And it was not because of celebrity that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm meeting
Yeah.
Mr. Virgin, like the Richard Branson. But to have someone, and this comes back to role modelling, it's so important to have someone in business and in life that you can look up to and keep trying to emulate their behaviour and their winning strategies, because fundamentally it'll lead you to them. And how I got to Necker Island, I'm still I'm not really sure how it all came to bear. But, serendipity and everything aligned and lots of hard work.
Was a desire? Like just actually wanting to?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It was on my bucket list, but I had no idea how it was going to happen. Absolutely no idea. How do you get to Richard Branson?
But even to let it be on the bucket list, I think that's what, a lot of people, they don't even let stuff like that get onto their list.
Yeah.
So if you don't put it on your list, it's definitely not happening.
100%.
So, and that, I think that's sort of a bit of a reflection on the mindset that you had to adopt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was just so important to me. I really wanted to meet him and say thank you. Thank you for being that person that shared your story, and thank you for being that person that, when it got tough for me, at least I could say, well, hang on, someone else has done this.
That's awesome.
Because if I hadn't had that, I honestly don't know that I would have kept pushing. So I really encourage anyone to find whoever that person is for you and read about everything they're doing, learn what they learn, see what they watch on YouTube, watch what they're watching on Twitter, because then your brain starts to pick up their habits, and that sort of helps you.
Well, that will
step
feed
up.
into the vent, like what you're doing
100%.
with the female.
Yeah. And it's why I try and tell my story. It's why I try and be as available, I suppose, to either share my experience of being an entrepreneur, which I have been. I've set up businesses in the Middle East. And
Well, to that end, explain how that all came about. Because I was reading it, and basically I can tell there's a bit of a shortened part of the story. Because it goes, I was doing one thing, now I'm in Dubai, or Abu Dhabi, was it?
Dubai.
With an investment property business. And I was like, oh, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be a little bit crazy.
Totally.
And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Right? I'm very happy not to just be one-dimensional. I'm very happy to be multi-dimensional. And I had really wanted to work and travel overseas. My niece, who's very close to me in age, became very sick with cancer. And I remember sitting beside a hospital bed and thinking, if I was in that position, and at that stage we didn't think she would recover. Thankfully she has. She's alive and well and just got married, so that's all good. She's very happy. I remember thinking, well, if I was in that position and this is D-Day, what would I have wished that I'd done with my life that I otherwise am not going to do, sort of thing. And I came home to my partner at the time and said, I'm moving to Dubai to set up a property investment company. And I think from memory his words are, you have lost the plot. And I just remember this look of complete and utter dread on his face.
How old were you at the time?
This was 2000 the end of 2003. So we would have been, young to middle 20s. We'd been together for a long time. I was the crazy entrepreneur. He had been at the same company for a very long period of time in the wine industry and had just started working in the family property business. So he was like, what are you talking about?
Could you give an insight to people around that process? Like how you got there?
There's no process. It was just such a... Like I look at it now and go, that it was crazy. It was crazy. And he was right. When he looked at me and said, you've lost it, I'm sure I had semi-lost it, right? You've got someone you love so much. It's D-Day. You don't think they're going to survive. I'd wanted to work and travel overseas. It's like, oh my gosh, none of us know how long we have left. And I basically came home and said, that's what I'm going to do. So I left and he followed and he's still there, which is difficult.
Right.
Because he doesn't like the heat. He liked cycling, and at that stage there was no cycling inside of the UAE, and he's now started up a cycling
Indoor
club.
cycling? Or?
No, outdoor.
Ooh.
And he loved coffee, and that was probably the one consistent thing that he was going to get them both. But I went over and set up a property investment company and with a group and started selling Australian property to expats.
That's amazing.
So it's just one of those moments when, I suppose when the outtake is when your gut says go, don't get too into your head and start to rationalise, which gets harder as you get older and you've got responsibilities. I think it was just the gravitas of that personal situation that pushed me to say, this is it.
Yeah.
But, this year I'm starting to spend 50% of my time in China, so it's kind of like
oh my God.
Whereabouts in China?
Well, wait,
Based out of Shanghai.
before we get to that, so you because there's a bit to cover still. So how long? So mid-20s, do you get to 30 or just before 30?
No, so 24, 2004, so now everyone knows my age. That whole lie about me sort of discounting my age has now been broken.
I can't count, so.
Yeah, that's good. So 24, I go over to Dubai. Mm-hmm. I went over a couple of months before he came over. And we had an Australian business partner before we left. That had been sort of a serendipitous moment that I suppose had made all of it possible.
Yep.
Because if you've got a business over there, you have to have someone that has a relationship back to a UAE national.
Right.
So
is it like a percentage share in what you're doing?
Yeah, you've got to have a trailing line back to one of the national families.
One of the royal families. Seriously?
Well, a national, not necessarily part of the Sheikh's family, but you have to have, there has to be a share of profit that moves into a national area. Yeah, exactly. And there's no tax, so, that sort of
that makes
balances
sense.
out.
Right.
Yeah. so that just kind of happened. And I think my experience in life is when you're really clear about what you want, whether it's Richard Branson, whether it's about I'm moving to Dubai and I don't know how to do it. I'm moving to Shanghai, don't know how to do it.
Whoa.
The second you're really clear about what you do and don't want, there's something about the brain that starts looking for what does work. And if you're really clear when you're talking to people, they start to say, hey, I know someone in Shanghai, or you should speak to this person in whatever country. So I think the little gem that comes out of all of that is be really like crystal clear about what you're trying to achieve in your business and who are the people that are going to be helpful to move the dial for you and deliver measurable results, which is so very important to anyone that's a VC.
The challenge with some people, I talk from my experience, I've often found it difficult historically to zero in on things. And
that's an understatement. So
when you do, it's really powerful.
Yeah, it really is.
And then, so you come back and with a team set up Artesian.
No, so no. I can't take any credit for setting up Artesian at all. It was a business that had been in existence way before me.
Right.
And the business had been in existence since 2003.
Right.
And they didn't traditionally launch inside of the VC space, but as a result of the global financial crisis, which brought me back to Australia, I think that was a catalyst for them to start to look at, okay, well, let's get into VC.
And you came in as MD?
I was one of the team there, yes, and there's a big decent team now, all helping to raise money and build out, I suppose, a different model for venture capital. Traditional VC hadn't delivered a return for 10 years, been negative 5.5%. So trying to pick the winners in Australia at that time, and I don't think we've really seen anyone that has consistently been able to say, yes, you're a winner, yes, you're a winner, no, you're not necessarily. There's so many exogenous factors that make startups successful or not, and that's not always just the people mechanics. It's what's going on in the environment at a global level, at a domestic level. So, I followed in line with their philosophy, and it's the same philosophy now that we're carrying over into the new fund, which is let's partner with individuals in the ecosystem that get access to high quality, high volume deal flow so that when they present to one of our partners, they get rid of 90% of the businesses that are not yet ready for investment. They might be ready next year. It's not to say that the idea's wrong or the team's wrong. It's just not ready for investment yet.
With like I guess for those out there that don't quite get what happens in this space, like it's cool. It sounds awesome, venture capital, but I guess some people may not quite get the flow of how this whole situation works.
Yeah.
And so, like in layman's term, how would you explain venture capital and what goes on?
Yeah, so venture capital is the investment of a pool of money. Generally, not just the venture capitalists. So a venture group will raise a fund, usually, that has capital from a whole range of different individuals. And in Australia, and globally to this point, really has been wholesale investors. So high net worths, family offices, institutions like super funds, corporates, those that understand, I suppose, a little bit more the financial system and in them potentially losing the money that they invest, they're not as great a risk as a mum or dad. So there's some movement about retail money starting to move into the space through equity-based crowdfunding, but at the moment it's been an investment area sort of limited to that specific group that I talked about.
They just hand the money over and...
You'd love to think that was the case. Like you just rock up to the ATM and say...
Check out these guys, they're going to be amazing.
Please, sir, can I have some more? But really, they're there to make sure that if I'm an investor and you're the VC, I give you $10, more than that, but let's just use that in this example, and that you ring me in a period of time and say, I've got 10 times the money that you gave me and I'm very, very happy. But that model of then trying to pick that business to put the money into to get the 10 times return hasn't necessarily worked.
Like sharpshooting them. I know there's a more pooled concept now where you can you get exposure to more, so you're diversifying.
So we go for the more,
yeah.
Right? So versus the let's try and pick 20 winners, we say, let's pick a big portfolio of startups. So in the case of Capital X, it'll be up to 500 female founders.
Oh, wow.
And why I say up to is it could be 2 female founders together. It could be me and you, as long as I own equal, if not more, equity, right?
Okay.
So a founding team may not always be one person. And we'll go through our partners like I was describing before. We'll buy a little bit of our business or my business, whichever example we're following. And then if we're successful and show market traction and we go to a subsequent raise, so we're going to raise $500,000, as long as we can get 50% of the next raise filled by 3 individual unrelated investors,
Okay.
we will then top up the other bit. And I'll explain why.
So it's like underwriting?
Well, it's market proof. Because if you can get 3 individual investors, let's say we're their investors and we don't know each other, we're all going to have done our due diligence before we hand over our hard-earned money.
Totally.
So that's 3 sets of individuals going, oh, does this work? Is the market working? Is it not? Do I believe that this business has traction? Can the founders deliver on their promise? For us, we then look at these 3 investors and say, okay, these 3 people that just met over the pub after one too many drinks, that's not good due diligence, so we're not going to follow there.
Right.
But if we're 3 sophisticated business persons and we've gone out and we've done our DD and it sounds solid and we think we're representing our investors well, then yes, we'll top up, and on we go. So you end up with that
It's like a quadruple blind test, right?
It's always de-risking. So we
Yeah.
get the de-risk at the start through partners, and then we get a de-risk at every subsequent raise because there's got to be 50% closed before we will go
Cool.
in.
That's smart.
So it's Darwinian in theory.
Yeah.
Survival of the fittest.
Totally.
Okay?
And have you would have identified individuals that maybe make better decisions than other individuals?
Well, our DD is making sure that we find the right partners who have enough deal flow, have enough quality deal flow, and that their due diligence process is one that we feel de-risks the opportunity and maximises a return for our investors. So that's where we do our DD.
Right.
With those individuals. And in the case of Capital X, it'll be in Australia and it'll be into Asia and also into the US. So our investors get exposure across those 3 key markets.
So
and that's another
awesome.
De-risking strategy.
So awesome. Sounds so exciting. So you're shipping off, did you say Shanghai?
Shanghai will be a base for this year and into next year.
Yeah.
So I'll be here 50% of my time and I'll be over there 50% of my time.
Wow. And that's just because in China, what's attracting you there? Is it investor money or is it entrepreneurs or it's both?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think there's, firstly, there's investors that we haven't yet developed relationships with and allowed their capital to flow into a fund like this. We're seeing some amazing female founders come and male founders, so gender neutral across the board. We're seeing phenomenal Asian talent. I think we overinflate the value of America inside of this whole journey. We've got a great neighbour that's got great tech and money to invest into the sector. And so it's an area that hasn't been as
attractive?
As attractive, accessible, and tapped.
Right, yes.
So there's opportunity. And I think there's a huge opportunity for great Australian talent to leapfrog over let's call it the ditch, over into China as well as the US.
Because you're right. As soon as an entrepreneur makes it in China, they make it.
Yeah.
You don't have to go anywhere else. I mean, as far as I'm aware, the Chinese version of Uber is bigger than Uber.
Yeah. It's crazy. And I think that, Australia is quite close to the opportunity that our Asian neighbours represent. So, for example, we've got Virgin Australia Fashion Festival going on in Melbourne at the moment, and there was a breakfast put on by the Victorian government the other day, and they had VIP.com, which is a e-tailing platform from China. Now, given you both sort of rolling your eyes, I'm assuming you've never heard of VIP.com.
No.
It's huge.
Is it?
And it's booming and it's taking over, it's moved from China into the States and just expanding at this, phenomenal rate. And now, they've come into Australia and there's just this huge opportunity for Australian brands now to have this access point into China and vice versa. And so from my perspective, it's how do we capitalize on that opportunity and how do we de-risk and maximize return to our investors? And we need to have two other markets that are more progressive and have different opportunities to, satisfy those 2 points of de-risking and maximising returns.
Does that mean you've learnt Chinese?
I have a tiny bit of Mandarin.
Shishini.
谢谢 and 再见 and 你好嘛. But I'm
We'll give you money.
Yeah, thanks. I basically just said hi and how are you?
That's all I need. No one asked me.
But I'm trying to learn as quickly as I can. So I hope by the time I come back in 2 years, I can have most of this conversation in Chinese. So that means you'll have to come along for the journey.
Done. I'm in.
Really cool. That's a good challenge.
So that's the next chapter.
Yeah, and I mean, you've taken the experience because again, and I keep coming back to your career. It's so like you've just ridden this wave of opportunity. Now it's sort of capitalizing, I guess, in capital X, and now you're taking that and going to China. What does success look like for you now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't feel successful yet.
What?
And success will come for me when I can sit back.
That blows my mind.
Well, when you're a VC, it's about where are the results to prove that you've been somewhere? Where's the impact, right?
Being on Necker Island.
Cool experience. But cool for me, but what's that done for the wider community?
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So it's great for me. Like, best 10 days of your life, everyone put it on your bucket list, phenomenal. But for me, really, success will be able to come when I can sit back and say, we've changed the dynamic in an ecosystem that didn't previously recognise the value of female talent, that we've invested in up to 500. So let's say that we get to 300. That's a significant difference from where we are now. If we deploy $50 million, that then goes on to help build even one unicorn, $1 billion female company. And there are lots of female unicorns, just not well known. I mean, a great example of that is Linda Weinberg, who founded lynda.com. Lynda.com exited to LinkedIn, now Microsoft, for $1.5 billion in April of 2015. No one knows her name.
That's the training thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. I think we've got, if you look at great Australian talent that's been adopted by China, Jess Wilson, who's got Stashed, which is like fashion for Tinder. And so the algorithm starts to learn whether you're a guy or whether you're a girl, your preference in clothes that you like to wear.
Right.
And you start to put your clothes into your online wardrobe, and then you can go through and purchase. So Jess got to participate in a reality TV show called, she'll kill me if I get the name wrong, but I think it was The Last Unicorn. It's something unicorn in China. And, she won third place.
Wow.
So the only Westerner, the only female, and as a result, she's secured international VC dollars into the business, and it's growing over there.
Wow.
So, Jess is very vocal in the startup ecosystem and should be, and is an amazing role model for other women.
And Canva as well, which is one of Australia's biggest success stories.
Yeah, Shoes of Prey. So what we need now as an ecosystem is exits.
Yep.
Because that's a real stamp of approval. Done, dusted. Investors get get their money back, and sit there with a glass of champagne and say that was a great thing. Let me do it again.
Well, then you can be there to catch the reinvestment.
Hopefully, and then for them to act as role models to encourage more individuals, regardless of gender, but really specifically, so that other young women come up and look at them and say, if they can do that, I can do that.
LearnVest was a big company, or still is a big company in the US, and it was financial education. Now, the name of the founder escapes me, but it was a female, and she sold, I think, for almost $500 million or to that extent. And financial advice is very much in this education arena. And it took a psychologist. She was actually a psychologist, not a financial planner, and created this massive business. I think we're seeing financial advice go through this, and I used this word before, enlightening, which probably makes it sound a bit more, romantic than it needs to be. But regardless,
let's just use it for the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure we're going to start to see some big changes in financial advice, especially around, because it's changing so much, it's changing so rapidly. Let's say out there, there's a financial advisor and they're thinking about getting into this startup space, right? Male or female. What kind of advice would you give to them to say, okay, they want to disrupt financial advice? How would they go about doing it?
Make sure you've got a globally scalable idea. Right, so try, test, fail, refine your business model before you sort of leave your day job or leave that security. Read Lean Startup. It's just the Bible. It'll teach you all the key things of making sure that you actually prove your business model before you go out and try and sell something that you think that everybody wants, but the market doesn't necessarily want. Except that it's going to take you far longer than you ever thought it would. Develop relationships now that you'll need in the future, and that's investors, that's corporate partners. Get yourself visible. Start with a business even today that's just start selling stuff online, whether it's eBay or anything, just to understand the customer journey and experience and online SaaS platforms. Go to meetups, get educated, because I think there's, at the moment, it's this perception that being an entrepreneur and a startup founder is akin to being like a world famous rock star. It's not. It's a gladiator sport. It has a 90% failure rate. To go into it, you're crazy, but good crazy. And it's the most, I think.
Clay's good crazy.
Yeah, I think it's the most exciting, valuable experience of your life, but it's tough. And, lastly, really build out a plan for yourself. This comes back to another passion point for me, which is make sure you've got a team around you and a plan for what happens when you fail. Because the journey of an entrepreneur is very up and very down. And unfortunately, in the startup community, we have a very high, and this is globally, mental health problem. It's really, really hard. So make sure you've got a backup plan for failing. So when you have one of those bad days, you've got someone to talk to or got the dog to go for a walk with, because that just evens out the bumps, the troughs and the peaks.
Very awesome. Very awesome. Paddy, do you have any questions pre-planned, my man?
Oh, where do I start?
Go for it. You can ask whatever you want.
I reckon we were talking about the concept of, I guess, female advisors and I guess the differences in what they're able to do sometimes with clients compared to what would be traditional. Like I've seen female and male advisors behave exactly the same way and with the same sort of characteristics. But I guess you've got these natural states that sort of come out, and I think Clay was sort of alluding to how things are evolving and the discussions in advice are evolving a bit more, and it's moving away from like the tangible sort of money, like in your hand, greed sort of dynamic to a space where it's like. It's a bit more transient. It's sort of like people are looking at how do they spend their money a bit more.
It's life coaching mixed with financial planning.
And I think we're also seeing, this desire for investors, regardless of gender, to say, I don't want to put my money just into something that's damaging the environment. I want to do good and I want to do good business.
I had a client the other day, email. I I heard about these other
Ethical investments.
There you
ethical ECG. They got all these names.
Social impact, all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's doubled in the last, I think, couple of years. It's still an you would call it an
in proportion to the market.
Yeah, it's still around 5%. It's not massive, but it's a massive thing that's growing.
Well, I think there's still a lot of people questioning, can you do good and do good business?
Right.
And I think if you look at a company like Salesforce, that's a company that is singing from the rooftops, we can do both. And again, it comes back to role modelling. I think when we see more of those businesses be successful, I think Salesforce just continues year on year to have like triple digit growth.
They're massive. We just went to their annual conference here in Sydney.
Yeah.
Wow. Multiple levels. They make a shit ton of money.
Yeah, if they can spend on the decor like that, there was
yes. Yeah.
And good on them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And that's a business that was founded in this idea of the family starting in Hawaii. How do we look after everyone? How do we create great profit? How do we deliver a product and solution that makes everyday life easier and delivers a return on investment to both the company and also to those using it? So I think to move the dial on getting more people into this sort of space and leveraging this trend is to see that you can satisfy both of those goals.
Yeah. Do you think it's giving up on, I guess, more traditional held business objectives that gets you there? Like I'm always trying to oscillate between, do you have to sacrifice to be social? And I guess like what you're saying with Salesforce,
I think we're moving into an era where you don't have to sacrifice.
It comes together. You actually, I reckon some businesses, the more social they are, it actually leans to a better outcome.
Ben & Jerry's is one of those as well.
For sure. There's lots of great examples. I think we're seeing, whether it's the entertainment sector, whether it's VC, there's this recalibration. And as long as recalibration results in better impact overall, then I think that's a great thing. I think we should be looking to leave behind the past and how can we do things better where everybody wins.
Yeah.
I think more and more that's just going to be something that we're going to try, test, fail and more quickly adapt because the speed of disruption is just skyrocketing. I mean, in 1955, the average lifespan of a company on the S&P 500 was over 65 years. Today, it's under 15 years. And in the next, 10 years, it'll be under, 10 or so. So,
wow.
I think sitting back and saying we've done it this way always, or that's worked to deliver returns is just going to fail. I mean, look what happened in the GFC, and we had these huge companies that just disappeared. So, yeah, I think it's an exciting time. I think it's an exciting time to be someone that's, looking after and advising people about their money, but I think the need to be really educated as to what's going on at a macro level and understanding the implications of technology and all the components of the fourth revolution, robotics, AI, automation I don't think you can sit there and be an advisor anymore and be blind to that stuff.
Well, to that end, you're talking about this fourth revolution. What percentage of a portfolio should the average person have allocated to VCs, to higher risk, to higher... look at it from a macro point of view. What would you suggest?
This isn't financial advice, by the way, guys.
Someone please play the disclaimer. I think it depends on the individual's personal financial state. So you should never be investing in a high risk area of investment if you can't afford to lose that money.
Totally. So,
and I wouldn't go out and invest all your money straight away as well, especially if you haven't had experience in this sector. Go and learn and maybe, look at the different models of VC. Get out there, understand the ecosystem, maybe swap a bit of time and expertise for a tiny bit of equity or, a return or a commission on helping a startup bring in new clients.
Yep.
but don't just jump into throwing money into something because it's cool and you want to be part of the gang if you can't afford to lose that money. So it's very much on an independent basis.
Very good point. And just to wrap us up, one of the coolest things was that you just spoke at Harvard.
Yes. Yes, I did.
So
Yes.
quickly tell us about that.
It was a full circle moment for me. Clearly that night that I told my dad I was dyslexic was like what set my life up for the next, 25 years. At the time that I told him, we had a family member that was at Harvard. And I remember thinking, that is so cool. Like,
Of course.
like that's the pinnacle of education, right? But that's not going to be for me. That's just not something I'm ever going to get to do. And I remember that feeling of exclusion and sadness and stupidity and, all that self-doubt and self-loathing. So to be invited to even be there was just like the greatest honour. And it came on the morning that my dad died last year of Alzheimer's. So I'm not a believer in all that sort of, serendipity sort of stuff, but it was very significant to me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So to go over and to speak and get access to these amazing young minds that are just working on huge, big problems and creating these amazing solutions really gave me a whole lot of confidence that our future is in really, really good hands. But I think it's so important to sit with yourself, and I try and do this every year, and, ask myself, what would I really like to do with my life? And not get into, I can't, it's not possible, that's not for me, and put it on the list. And once it's on the list, your brain starts to figure out, how do I do that? So I hope in sharing that, thank you.
No, that's so. Out of everything, I definitely wanted to wrap up on that because I think I was reading in an article about you that it was 20 years after you'd spoken to your dad about your dyslexia that there you are presenting at Harvard at a time where you thought you'd never be a part of it.
Never.
Super cool. All right, Caitlin, thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's been cool.
You're like a leader in not just the startup world, but also with females in business, and so it's just been a real pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
All right, bye guys.
See ya.